Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week. Welcome back to Everything Casual. Today we are looking at the Newcastle Casuals. We will look at their complete history, starting with the Bender Squad, then on to Newcastle Mainline Express, then the famous GREMLINS. We will look at how and where the Newcastle firm formed, talk about clashes with their rivals and some of their most famous clashes. Then we will listen to real accounts, inside information from actual members of the mob, and what it was really like to be part of the casual crew. The Newcastle Bender Squad was an early incarnation of Newcastle United's football hooligan firm, active primarily in the 70s and 80s. The term Bender referred to their habit of engaging in all-day drinking sessions, often leading to violent confrontations. The Bender Squad emerged from the working-class communities of Newcastle, with members often congregating in the Big Market area, a known nightlife district. Their activities included travelling across the UK to follow Newcastle United, engaging in pub brawls, and participating in organised fights with rival hooligan groups. Over time, the Bender Squad evolved into more organised groups, notably the Newcastle Mainline Express NME, and later the GREMLINS, which became more prominent in the 1990s. Mark Menim was part of the Bender Squad, Mainline Express and the GREMLINS. This is what he had to say about his involvement with the Bender Squad from an early age, in his own words. "I lived in the East End and everybody did it," he said. "It was a different society back then. It was just part of life. On a Saturday everyone went to the match. I first got into football at 9 when I went with a few of my mates. The game didn't really interest me. I tried a few times to get into it, but I found it boring and just wanted to be somewhere else. The crowd interested me though. The singing between the fans and the passion for their club and city struck a chord with me. Then, in my teens, I witnessed the violence, and I was hooked from then on and started to follow it on every occasion." By the age of 12, Menim was determined to get into the famous firm of the day, the Bender Squad, who were known to get drunk before matches, then look for fights. Menim's disinterest in the game itself meant he often used to go scouting for the older lads, looking for away supporters outside the ground. "I hated football and preferred Newcastle to get beat, if I'm honest, because you always seem to get more fights after a defeat," said Menim. "We would look for stickers on cars and vans that may say the vehicle was bought in Manchester, for instance, and we'd log that and go back to it after the match, as it was probably going to have a few aways in it." Menim was accepted into the Bender Squad's fold, and with this firm and later the Notorious GREMLINS, he travelled the country looking for fights. "I never got scared. You don't think you're going to get killed," he said. "You just get this amazing rush. It's exciting. I have never used a weapon. I have used tables and chairs. But I have never stabbed anyone, and I have never used a knife. I have been in a few incidents where people have been really hurt and I was a bit worried. But I have never felt guilty, and you could never run away." Menim, from Biker, Newcastle, was so hooked on violence, nothing else mattered. Relationships came and went, and even after becoming a father, he couldn't give up. Not long after the birth of his daughter, Menim was jailed for carrying a knife when he travelled down to London in 1987 for a Spurs game, something he claims was a fit-up. Following his release 18 months later, he tried to go straight for the sake of his family and stayed away from football and fighting for 2 seasons. But the pull was too strong, and when he returned to violence, his partner of 12 years left him, taking his 3-year-old girl with her. Losing his daughter through hooliganism is his only regret. "I was getting locked up every other week. I have lost a lot of girlfriends through it," he explained. "I was with my daughter's mother for about 12 years, and she stuck with us. When my daughter was born, I tried, and I stopped for 2 seasons, and I kept away." I got back into football in the year 1991. I was running a pub in Westerhope and I met a few of the Gremlins when they came in. I went to an England match with them, and that's when I got the buzz back. I have lost a lot. I do regret losing my daughter. I have not seen her since she was 3 and she's 25 now. All she knows about me is that I'm a football hooligan. Many of Menim's comrades from the 80s and 90s gave up the violence when they settled down and had families, but he found it impossible to quit and said he has only stopped now because of his ill health. I never grew up. A lot of them settled down, but I never did, he said. I have only retired now because I have had 2 heart attacks. I would still be doing it if I could. It never leaves you. And he said CCTV cameras, mobile phone technology, and new policing methods would make it impossible to do what the Bender Squad, the Gremlins, and the NME did back in their heyday. It was different days back then, said Menim. There was no CCTV, no mobile phones, and the police didn't have the football intelligence unit that they have now. It's finished now. Back then, as long as you didn't get arrested on the day, you were fine. But now the police just sit back and get it all on CCTV. Then they put your door in days later and you are in court. Then you have a banning order. There are a lot of keyboard warriors now. They all give the big un on Facebook, but they would never come up here and fight. They talk the talk, but they can't walk the walk. We will hear more from Mark later and go into further detail about what it was like being a member of the firm. But now let's take a look at the Newcastle Mainline. The NME emerged in the early 80s, drawing its name from the main railway line connecting Newcastle to other major cities. This name reflected their practice of travelling en masse by train to both home and away matches, facilitating organised encounters with rival firms. The group was notorious for orchestrating matchday disruptions, both in Newcastle and in other cities, contributing to the broader hooligan culture prevalent in the UK at the time. One of the most infamous incidents involving the NME occurred in the year 1985 during an away match at Liverpool's Anfield Stadium. Approximately 300 members of the NME travelled to Liverpool, where they confronted home supporters. This event is often cited as a significant episode in the history of football hooliganism, illustrating the lengths to which such firms would go to assert their dominance. We will go into more detail about that clash later on. The NME had fierce rivalries with other hooligan firms, particularly those associated with Sunderland, such as the Seaburn Casuals. These rivalries often led to violent clashes, both planned and spontaneous, contributing to the notoriety of the NME. The group's activities have been documented in various media, including books and documentaries, providing insights into the subculture of football hooliganism during the 1990s. I have a video on this channel all about Newcastle and the Seaburn Casuals, so check that out if you want to know more about those clashes. The Newcastle hooligan groups, including the Newcastle Mainline Express NME and the Gremlins, were primarily associated with Newcastle city centre and areas close to St James's Park, the home ground of Newcastle United Football Club. However, members of these groups were not necessarily from one specific area, but often came from various parts of Newcastle and surrounding regions in the northeast of England. The city centre was the focal point for pre-match gatherings and post-match activities. Pubs around St James Park, such as the Strawberry and Rosie's Bar, were often meeting spots for members. Some members of the hooligan groups were linked to Newcastle's West End, a densely populated area historically known for working-class communities. Biker and Heaton, these neighbourhoods in the east of Newcastle, were home to some members of the firms. Biker, in particular, was known for its strong community ties, which could extend to football allegiances. Situated across the River Tyne from Newcastle, Gateshead also had individuals who identified with the NME and the Gremlins due to its proximity and close ties to the city. Members of these hooligan firms were not restricted to Newcastle itself. Many came from towns and villages in the broader Tyneside area, including South Shields, North Shields, and even further afield in the northeast, reflecting a wide-ranging allegiance to Newcastle United. The group's regional diversity highlighted their shared identity through football and their connection to the club rather than any single neighbourhood. The Newcastle Mainline Express had approximately 200 to 300 members during the 80s. The NME was active primarily in the early to mid-1980s and had a core group of highly organised individuals with many more loosely affiliated supporters joining them for major events or clashes. And this is the article that revealed that Mark had received a banning order. Banning orders were imposed on David Skeen, Mark Menim, Darren Brindley, Stephen Wallace, Terence Donahue and Barry Crompton, who were all believed to be bound for Portugal for England's opening game with France. Police in Newcastle swooped after gathering intelligence on the known hooligans, 3 of whom were said to have been involved in violent clashes when Newcastle United played in the UEFA Cup. Let's hear from Mark again, to a bit of insight and inside information about what it was really like to be part of the firm in the golden era of football hooliganism. There have been a lot of people asking over the years why Newcastle's lads haven't done a book. Simple, it has never effing interested us. We like a fight, and it's as simple as that. We have let our hands and feet do the talking over the years, home and abroad, and it's something that I thoroughly enjoyed. Many of the lads have read every book there is to read on the subject of hooliganism, and we tend to feature in most of them, if not all. There are a lot of untruths within some of those pages, and collectively we have decided to set the record straight. If we got done, then we would tell you we got done. If we ran you all over the city, then prepare to be named and shamed. We haven't followed a particular format here. We have started with our main rivals, the Mackhams. That's probably the main interest of many, and from there we go around the country and Europe for town, and the international scene for country. Mark Menim also said this: most of the young lads today have got no idea how violent Newcastle could be in the 70s. Most gangs were either skinheads or hairies. You had the Scotswood Aggro Boys, Big Lamp, New Biggin Hall, Blakelaw, North Kenton, Kenton Bar Boys, and the best of the bunch, the Denton Burn Aggro Boys. There was a slightly younger crew emerging. We called ourselves the Denton Burn Mafia Crew. Every night of the week there was running battles with hundreds of lads invading each other's patch. The main confrontation site was the field at West Denton, and the coppers didn't nick you in those days, they just gave you a good hiding. I remember one lad got his nose broken by a busy, and his old man took him to Newburn police station to complain. The sergeant said, "If you don't F off, I will break your nose too." That's how it was in those days. One night when Scotswood went up to New Biggin Hall, the police came on top big time, stopped what would have been a bloodbath, and the lads all legged it after depositing their weapons in the waste bins. It was on the local news the next night. There was everything: roofers' hammers, axes, knives, coaches and pickaxe handles. After that incident there was a documentary called All Dressed Up and Nowhere to Go, featuring the Scotswood mob. They thought they were effing film stars afterwards. Let's hear from another ex-Newcastle lad who has not been named, but he does talk about a trip away to Millwall in the late 80s. This is what he had to say about the away day. So here's what happened to me on one particular day following Newcastle United. At the time, Millwall had just been promoted to the old First Division, and our visit had been pencilled in for December 9th. Willie McFall was manager at the start of that season, and after a dreadful start, exception being a 2-1 win away at Luckypool, he was sacked and replaced by caretaker boss Colin Suggett in the October, before Jim Smith eventually took over in December 1988 as a permanent replacement. Relegation looking odds-on, even with the signing of a certain Mr. Liam O'Brien. It was generally agreed to meet in the Elephant and Castle at 12. So, for some reason we drove down, myself, brain-dead Brian, Crazy Colin, the name will become self-apparent later on, and a young lad who we took with us to drive on the way back. We parked up at Finchley upon arrival, bought return tube tickets, and a while later were sipping woodpecker cider inside the Elephant and Castle pub, which at about 12:30 p.m. I estimated at least 500 lads in or around the boozer, with what seemed like every head the ball who had ever watched us in attendance. I quickly found Monty, and he informed me 2 of our lot had been nicked at a car park in King's Cross with more tools in their motor than your average B&Q store. Come 2 p.m. and the mob was just too massive to go unnoticed. That's when about 90 of us, led by 2 black lads, I will not name them, but they were 2 of the gamest lads in Newcastle's hooligan history, along with their 3rd white brother, if you know you know. So we head off down the Old Kent Road, and I think the rest of the mob went to get the tube to Millwall from London Bridge. Right, we're off and head straight into the Thomas Becket pub for a pint as no Millwall spotted. Next boozer up, and it is packed with Millwall. Our 2 main men lead the charge. Millwall come running out. This is where it got a bit surreal for me. Colin produces a half bottle of vodka. Me, Colin, what you doing? It's no time to a drink, man. As Colin launches the bottle, it sparkles the first kid out the bar, ricochets off the kid's head and puts the plate glass bar window through, hence the nickname Crazy Colin. Ours 2 lads at the front are bang in and it's going off big time, only for it to stop as quickly as it had started. Old Bill everywhere. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.